The Graphic Histories Podcast.
I got bit by a radioactive bug. I tried an experimental drug. Went up for a stroll on a gamma testing range. I found an enchanted hurricane. I made a serum that made me small. I modified the serum so it would make me tall. Radioactive isotope in my eyes. Dying alien helped me accessorize. I gained the proportion and strength of a spider. Now I'm invincible and I can fly. I lost my sight, my other senses were heightened. I'm gonna put on my pajamas and go fight crime.
Hey there, lucky listener, and welcome to the Graphic Histories Podcast. My name is Andre Mayette, your podcast host. Big thanks to Uka the Mock for our theme song, Superpowers, and big thanks to you for tuning in once again. Today's episode, I speak with a couple. One, Lisa Burdage and John Hazard, who together create the online webcomic Background Noise, which is sort of in slice of life look at their own lives, their own relationship, and what it takes to be artists in their own world and traversing that sort of sphere. It's a very cool, very great book, and it's out right now on Kickstarter, so you can kickstart it and get the collection of their Valentine's Day sort of special. It's very, very fun. The style is amazing, and it's very heartfelt, very touching. If you've been in a relationship for any period of time, it'll certainly speak to you in some manner. We do talk about their lives, about their creative process, how they came to meet one another, how they navigate this sort of post-Trump America. Yes, we do talk about Trump for a while, and I know that's probably not something everybody wants to hear. People probably want to get away from that and not discuss it. I certainly don't want to discuss it, but unfortunately, it's a pretty big milestone in the culture right now. And as these talks are sort of geared to get to understand the creative process of the people that I'm talking to and their lives and their outlook on life in general, I feel as though talking about that a little bit will certainly give some insight into how they're dealing in the world of artists. You know, art is certainly not something that's discussed a lot in the sphere of what's going on, and it's certainly something that's falling by the wayside in a much, I want to say more important, because I think art's very important, but a much bigger conversation, you know, about all the insanity going on down there. And sometimes there's a lot of censorship going on, there's a lot of things happening in the States right now, and as two creators that live in the States, it's important to get how they're dealing with that, how they're framing it, how they're working with it, how they're working outside of it, and how they're trying to subvert it. And it's a great conversation, and it's certainly important, especially with American creators, as my two guests are, to get their insight into this. And it's important to hear the voice of artists that are getting lost in the shuffle. So very happy to have John and Lisa on the show. It was a really cool conversation, and I don't actually get to talk to, you know, couples that often, so it's kind of interesting and a new dynamic to do it that way. And as someone who's been in a very long-term relationship now, close to 20 years, I certainly understand where they're coming from as working together, and also it's interesting to see them doing a creative, you know, outlet together, because it's a very cool book and well worth your time. So be sure to check out that Kickstarter. It's available now. It's online, Background Noise. Look it up on Kickstarter. You will find it. It is a very cool book. I ordered my copy. It's coming. I don't know when, but it's coming at some point, and I'm very excited to read it. So you can check out the Instagram and the Facebook page for all their stuff as well. It's all on there, and it's a nice little thing to have a comic strip pop up in your feed every once in a while to give you a nice, sweet insight into life and relationships and all that beautiful stuff that makes us human. So I can't be grateful enough to John and Lisa for being on the show. It was really great to have them. So, you know, I don't want to talk anymore. You've heard me talk. It's enough talking. I got to mix a bunch of episodes because I'm getting a little behind. Life's getting busy. So why not wait any longer? Let's just get into my conversation with John and Lisa, the creators of Background Noise.
Okay, I'll go first. Hey, I'm Lisa Burdage. I am one of the co-creators of Background Noise Comic. I we are launching a Kickstarter for our first book called Love Letters Every Day, and we're very excited to be here talking to you.
And I'm John Hazard, the illustrator, Background Noise Comic, and co-creator. And what else was I supposed to say?
Oh, that's fine. That works.
That's it.
As long as people can
So
identify the voice for the
your
person.
head is kind of
All
cut
right.
off, John. Do you want to pull the camera back so you're in it?
Uh, sure. I
I
mean,
don't know. Are you using
is this
video,
video?
Andre?
A little bit in promotion, but not. It's only like a few
Okay,
little
okay.
reels. It's not too
All right.
crazy.
'Cause,
So,
yeah, I was distracted because I was trying to figure out because I got a green screen.
Mhm.
I work part-time in a podcasting studio, so
Oh
I
wow.
thought I could actually put something promotional on my green screen background, but
That's
if
handy.
it's not important, I'll ignore it. Also, this microphone is a prop.
Oh, it
Oh,
is.
really? Yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay. Get
that's
it out.
great.
It looks like a biomorphic shape that's in the middle of the.
All right.
Or are you guys? Are you guys in separate locations, or like? I know you are, but are you in separate places in the country or the world? Or
No,
just?
no, no,
Oh,
no.
okay.
Like I said, I work part-time
Oh, your
in the
studio.
city.
Okay.
We live in Brooklyn,
Oh, okay.
so works from home.
Mm.
Uh, and sometimes I work from home, and sometimes I work from a podcasting studio in the East Village.
How's
Yeah.
the weather in Brooklyn today?
Cold.
They're in
Yeah.
Brooklyn. It's cold. I
Yeah.
was
Cold.
gonna say, Brooklyn and the East Village are kind of different worlds, but that's all we are.
I'm a East Coaster as well, but I'm in Canada. I'm up in Nova Scotia.
Oh
So
yeah, where are you?
Nova Scotia. So
Oh
just
wow.
yeah. So I'm on the just a little further up your coast. Not too
Yeah, yeah,
far.
yeah. We
Yeah.
applied to a residency program in Nova Scotia for this summer. I'm really hoping we can.
Oh.
It's called Hammer and it's on Beals Island.
Okay. Really? That's exciting.
Yeah, it's
Very
it's
cool.
cool. I can send you the link later if you're interested. Although I'm sure you don't need to like go to some, corner of the island if you're already there.
I take it. Yeah, I live
All
in
right, we'll share it with you later.
yeah, I live in Truro. It's like right in the center of Nova Scotia. So it's kind of like
Okay.
whenever you come through, like if you're driving up, you would have to go through, you guys would have to go through New Brunswick and then um, come over to the right. 'Cause we're a little further out. So you would, if
Got
you're
it.
going to Halifax, which is the capital of Nova Scotia, you'd have to
Right.
pass through where I live, which is about an hour away. It's kind of, they call it the hub of Nova Scotia, 'cause it's right in the middle.
Yeah.
So if you kind of go anywhere, you kind of go through it. So,
Yeah, I've been to Nova Scotia twice.
oh, nice.
Once when I was a kid, like I don't know, like I guess like a tween.
Hmm.
And then once, and I loved it so much that I went back when I was 16 and I did a bike trip
Nice.
with like, a bunch of other 16-year-olds and we did the circle. But I haven't been back since and I it's like I wrote this in the the application that it really has always been like something that stayed in my imagination
Mm.
as a very iconic place, and I would love to go back. So we're looking forward to go back. If we go back, we'll let you know. We
Oh,
can
please do. Yeah, I'd
coffee.
love to meet up. Yeah, for sure. I'll show you the sites.
Yeah.
Yeah, recently I think our premiere or something posted on social media that it was like I think we were featured on like Regis and Kelly or something or whatever it's called now. Sorry, Kelly and Mark or whatever it is. Because it was like they're talking about like doing European style vacations but not having to leave North America and like
Got
they were equating Nova Scotia to like Europe and like it kind of I guess. I mean, I've been to Scotland and Ireland and I wouldn't say it's like drastically different, but it's certainly
Yeah.
not like some people like even within Canada, we seem remote, but we're really not. I mean, there's
Yeah.
lots of big businesses. There's quite a few comic book creators that live here. Like it's
Yeah. Yeah.
because like you guys would be familiar, you can kind of do your job anywhere, right? So
Yeah, true. I
yeah,
remember Cape Breton Island being
yep,
very like magical,
yeah,
and I would really like John to see that.
yeah. It's
So,
beautiful. I would suggest going in the fall because that's when the leaves change colors. So it's usually the
oh
nice. Yeah,
wow.
it's usually really
Huh.
nice. Um, but yeah, there's some celebrities that like live here and kind of in secret. I remember Alan Arkin before he passed away had like a home in Cape Breton.
Oh wow.
I know Ethan Hawke has one out here, which is very close to where I grew up. It's just outside of Antigonish, another small town
Okay.
out here. It's a big university town. It's mostly known for Saint FX, which is kind of a big university. St.
Huh.
Francis Xavier University. But
Got it.
yeah, and I think Ben Affleck might have a place up here somewhere. Like every once in a while, there's like news that someone sees him at a convenience
Yeah,
store or
yeah, yeah,
something.
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a quiet little place away, right? And I can see why celebrities dig it.
Have you
Um,
always lived there? You said you grew up in Nova
yeah,
Scotia.
yeah.
Yeah.
Always been here. How about you guys? Always been in New York, the New York area?
Mostly, I mean, we both grew up in, I'll let John talk, I
Sure.
promise, but
I don't this might be
Um,
the first time I've had a couple on. So, it'll be interesting. It's a new dynamic.
um, we grew up in the suburbs of New York, and we
Hmm.
grew up in kind of very similar suburbs on either side of the river. So, John grew up in the more famously known Westchester, you
Oh,
probably
yes.
heard of,
Yeah.
and I grew up in a lesser known area called Rockland County, which is right over the border of Jersey, but not Jersey, not Jersey.
Okay. It's a
I'm
hard
not.
distinction.
Yes. You feel like you're in Jersey when you go to it, but
No,
Yeah.
you
you know,
don't. You really don't.
Lisa wants
Tell
everyone to
you're not
know
in
it's
Jersey. You're
not
not.
Jersey.
It's
It's
not
not
Jersey.
Jersey.
I think
So.
I think Westchester has only been my reference to it has always been X-Men because that's supposed to be where like Xavier's school is, right? In the X-Men
Yes,
comics. Yeah. So
it's exactly like Charles Xavier's.
yeah, there's mutants running around exactly the same. People with
Well, the
powers running
mutants are
around.
the same. That's about it.
Well, yeah. So usually the way the show works, just casual conversation, and then I guess I could split it between the two of you. So,
Cool.
I guess John, what started you? Like, what was your first intro to comics? Like, where did the love begin?
Well, actually, since you mentioned it, X-Men absolutely was one of my early comics.
Really?
But my intro to comics was newspaper comics. Reading them with my mother, and so it was funny comics. And then I'm sure I saw like an older cousin who had a comic book or two laying around, but the big one for me was Mad Magazine,
Nice.
discovering that as like in grade school and being able to go down to the corner candy store and getting a Mad Magazine. They seemed like very subversive. I wasn't sure. The comic, the subject matter ranged from politics, which I assumed I did not get a lot of the jokes, down to like poopy jokes. And so it really blew my mind. But then, it was just like all the superhero comics. Like I said, X-Men, when I was a kid, I was drawn to like family things because I had like a very crazy, disruptive, kind of scary family. So I
Oh,
wanted to be the X-Men because they were like this family of misfits. I also wanted to be like in the Brady Bunch and uh,
was it like
yeah.
just more like in a way? Did you find like a representation of the X-Men was more like a family that worked together, and was that something that was drawing to you, or is it more
Well,
like
they
just the
were they
idea
were
that?
they were like a kind of a family of orphans, a family of people whose families did not accept them and
Hmm.
couldn't get them. But then, these weirdos come together and they find each other. Like the X-Men comics back then, they were the only ones where you kind of like saw things other than just people beating each other up. They would also like have a cookout or something.
Yeah. Well, did you feel like another in your own family in that reason? Like, were you like a
Oh yeah,
standout
very
as
much.
an artistic person?
Well, as an artistic person at school
Yeah.
and and at home, I was just always like a nerdy person back when nerdiness was a very different thing when I was a
Yeah.
kid. It was
Yeah.
not, like right now it's like all the biggest tentpole movies are Marvel movies. It was not like that when I was a kid. It was like you say Doctor Who, and nobody in the world would know what the hell you're
Yeah.
talking about. You
Yeah,
know,
I'm
Um,
just on the like I'm just about to turn 40 this year, and I remember that like I'm on the cusp of that. Like I remember when like reading comics, I wouldn't tell people I read comics at school, and like
yeah.
I would read the things, order the things out of the back of the book, but like it wasn't like you'd sit at a table with a bunch of people in the same world and talk about nerdy stuff like that.
Yeah,
Now
yeah.
it's yeah, now it's
I
insane. There's
didn't
like
have that until Star Trek conventions.
yes, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And also, I was never like a normal boy.
Hmm.
Uh, I don't know. I had like too much feminine energy or something, and the other boys like, would kind of tease me for that, and so it was like a lot of bullying both in my home and at school.
No, that's unfortunate. Like, did you have like a lot of brothers and sisters?
One brother, one sister,
Yeah.
and we were close, and they were sweet kids, but they just weren't. They integrated into life in a better, more normal way than I could. I
Mm.
just like somehow never fit in.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunately a story I hear a lot often on this. There's a lot of artistic folks kind of fit into that vein. It's always kind of an outlier to me when I run into someone that's like, "Oh no, my parents were super, or like super okay with my art choice to go into the arts, and they loved that I was doing this, and they didn't want me to be a doctor or anything like that." And it's like, every once in a while you get one of those, and it's like someone who had hippie parents that were just really cool, and you're like, "Oh, this is a rarity. It's nice to see." So, yeah. How about you, Lisa? Same. Yeah, where did you kind of get introduced into comics?
Well, I mean, when I was a kid, I was more like a Richie Rich, Casper the Friendly Ghost,
Mm.
Little Lotto, that kind of universe, Archie comics, those kind of comics. I mean, I wouldn't can say that I was exactly a comic book kid. I was more like a, reading a million Nancy Drew books, reading a
Mm.
million, like, I went through a whole phase of reading. I used to go to garage sales and find like books from the 20s and 30s, Honey Bunch, and all of these like weird like books that no longer exist. And I just read them voraciously. They were kind of pop culture, um, kind some kind of weird vision of, perfect, you know, you know, people and they're in like this kind of like semi-rich world.
Mm.
And also I grew up Jewish, so I was about to say like kind of they were all like goyim, they were all like clearly like not, they were just this, like almost aristocracy kind of people.
Mm.
And then I really wasn't I was always tangentially sort of like, oh, comics are cool, Love and Rocket's fine,
Mm.
it wasn't until like Fun Home and some of more of the graphic novels came later that I started to get excited about comics and graphic novels. And obviously it was also because of John, because he was so into it. And John and I, this is our second relationship. So we
Mm.
were both married beforehand. And
Oh.
honestly, my first husband was all like trying to get me into comics. And I kind of pushed it away because I didn't want to be that part of that with him.
Hmm.
But it was different with John. So I would say John really got me into comics.
Oh, that's awesome. When did you two meet?
We met about 20 years ago. And we were it was right after it was we were both in the process of getting divorced, so the John will not believe that he thinks that he was divorced already. He wasn't. um we were both in the process of getting divorced. I was much like closer to having broken up with my husband. It was we had been through a lot of breakups, so it was kind of like the final one.
Mm.
I had very small children. I had a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old at the time.
Mhm.
So we actually met online because you don't really meet people much when you have a 2-year-old and a
Mm.
3-year-old. And then ironically, we actually knew people in common, which was weird. So we met online, and then suddenly, as we started to date, literally one of my best friends worked with him at Nickelodeon. Um, Another like dad in the neighborhood worked with him at Nickelodeon. There were like all these like weird connections that
Like
where
a
we knew each
Nickelodeon
other.
neighborhood where all the staff
Like
works at?
it
Yeah.
was, yeah, it wasn't. And they were, they weren't in the same neighborhood. One was like in the neighborhood, one was just somebody that I worked with. Um, I don't know, there were a few other people that we knew in common, John, right?
The New York
Besides,
City corporate world is
yeah,
kind of small.
Yeah. Interesting. Well,
And then the creative community is even smaller. So
yeah,
yeah, I often like whenever I talk to people from Toronto, it seems like everybody there knows everybody, and they probably all hang out at the same like the same
yeah,
drink and draw events when they're drawing comics and
yeah,
stuff. So,
I bet.
cool. Well, what was like for you, John, when like you were doing art? I assume when you were getting into comics as a kid and working your way into that was a career in art always a goal? Was that something that you were aiming towards from childhood, or something you came to realize later?
well, I always drew. My father was like a deadbeat daddy, kind
Mm.
of like ran off and disappeared. But he drew, and it was just always kind of assumed that I would kind of take up that mantle.
Mm.
And it was sort of like a very like sort of natural talent for me. And honestly, I didn't know what else I could do. But In high school, I read 1984,
Hmm.
and it blew my mind. And I saw it in my head visually. And my first thought was that I wanted to maybe make a comic book of it. But back then, um, I I my most of my exposure to comics by then was superheroes,
Mhm.
and I thought that was pretty much all you could do. Excuse me,
Yeah, no worries.
all you could do with comics, really, and that they wouldn't be taken seriously because in America, particularly at that time, they were thought of as disposable kid stuff.
Mhm.
Um, and then And so my thinking was, because I was, young and like, had big crazy dreams, I thought, well, I can't make it as a comic book. People won't take it seriously enough. And maybe an animation that way it could have music. Oh, maybe I need to make it a movie. And so I decided I was going to become the next Steven Spielberg and George Lucas combined.
Mhm.
And so I went to film school at Pratt. But after 4 years of film school, I realized that I was not a people person. I was not let's get together some funding for this and let's get together a crew and I was not that kind of person. Filmmaking is very collaborative.
Mhm.
Um, and also I would have liked to do all the things. I wanted to do the effects and the script and the costuming. And then I realized you could do kind of all these things in a comic. Also, while I was in college, the public perception of comics changed a lot. Mouse came out,
Hmm.
and Frank Miller's books. Excuse me, my notifications are dinging. Frank Miller's books came out, Ronin and the Dark Knight Returns and all that, and Love and Rockets that Lisa mentioned, and it became clear that actually you can do anything in comics, and the American public was starting to learn what Europeans and Japanese people already knew, that comics is actually a real art form that deserves respect and
Mhm.
attention.
That's
And
quite a moment in a I think any person that's into comics life when you realize that, like when you see a book
right,
that's not a kind of superhero book and you're like, oh
yeah,
wait, there's like real human stories here.
right,
And I was probably too young to really put it into context. I one of mine was Box Office Poison, which is one I highly suggest. Um, and I talked to the creator of that too, and he was sort of championed by Wizard magazine, which is what brought him to my attention when I was a kid.
yeah,
And that led me to all these other things. But no, like Love and Rockets and like Stray Bullets and all those sort of things that are just like superhuman, stories. Mouse was a huge one for, almost everybody, I think. But
yeah,
well, that's really cool. So it's interesting that film school has kind of led you to it. But I mean, hey, like I've talked to someone before that was like, the budget for a film versus for a comic, like you could have 1,000 spaceships in your comic, you just have to draw them instead of,
yeah.
paying VFX. Oh, that's very cool. And how about you, Lisa? So when did writing was writing always the goal?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Just pretty much.
Was it the Nancy
Always.
Drew bug got in you and you just had to keep running or
Yeah, just since I was very young,
nice.
it was always clear. I mean, there was a minute in high school where, I mean, I always thought I was going to do some kind of artistic thing. I actually did ceramics from the time I was
Oh, cool.
5. And so I almost went to school to be a potter. And I also
Interesting.
played the cello and I was pretty serious about that as well. And at some point, like I remember making a decision. I thought that being a potter meant you had to go to Vermont and like sit in the woods. And I actually am a people person, and that
Uh,
did not appeal to me. And so I did do one pottery class in college. I went to McGill,
mhm,
and they're not a very arts friendly school, if you probably know. And
mhm.
my advisor literally said, "When are you going to stop taking these basket weaving classes?" And it just became something that I did on the side. But I always wrote. I started publishing poems and short stories when I was pretty young, and I've been doing it ever since. I mean, I only started writing comics since John came into my life,
Mhm.
but before that, I've written a lot of other things. And in my day job, I am a copywriter, creative director, so it is how I make a living.
Nice. Well, there's a lot of attention to detail comes with a job like that that certainly would add a
Yeah,
lot to the writing process, I'd imagine. So
yeah.
that's very cool. Um, so John, I noticed you work for Nickelodeon, and as Lisa mentioned, how did that come about?
Well, specifically, I worked for Nickelodeon Online in like in the MTV building in Times Square, and uh, I had been working in internet startups uh, for a few years, and was sort of taught myself Flash animation,
Mhm.
and I was working at a company that did online greeting cards, and that really like let me do kind of whatever I wanted with the animation to like, they would say like we need, some animated Christmas cards, animated Easter cards, and then they would just let me kind of write them and storyboard them and then just execute them. And so then it doesn't really happen anymore like this, but somebody saw my portfolio on monster.com and called me into Nickelodeon. And I started there doing basically kind of the same thing, like basically ad banners. But when you go to the Nickelodeon site, there's this kind of big square of animation that shows you different things that are happening either on air or on the website
Mhm.
that week. And I was hired to do those. Then I did some like kind of choose your own adventure animated stories for the website. And then I did my big things where I designed the avatars for a like a virtual world thing that
Oh,
Nickelodeon did back then called Nicktropolis, where you can make a little person and you customize them, and then you make a little house and you buy crap for their house,
oh,
and
okay.
I like designed and animated the little avatars. And then I was the animation director of for these dream sequences for one of their live action shows, and it was a really terrible show. So I like hope nobody remembers this show because despite the fact that
Say
I
that all
like,
the time.
yeah,
Maybe
despite
people, you say that sometimes people are like, I love that
I was
show.
gonna say you got to be
it
careful
was a
because
bad
some
show.
it could be somebody's favorite show, and it
It
happens.
was a
Like
bad
Yeah.
you'll
show.
talk to people.
It was called Romeo with an exclamation mark at the end. It was about the rapper Lil Romeo and his dead Master P.
Oh
No, no, no. You don't have to
yeah.
remember it. No, 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 no. And
Hey, I don't
basically
have deep
they
memories. I just remember it existed.
yeah.
That's fine.
Yeah,
So
oh yeah.
yeah.
There's nothing deep to remember about it. It was a terrible show, and my animated sequences were terrible because the concept was terrible.
Mm.
Don't,
Basically, it
don't
was
say that. They were not terrible. Oh my God. Scratch
it,
that. Cut it out.
basically basically the concept for the show was that when Lil Romeo would get into trouble with his little white friend, he would the camera would zoom in on Romeo's face, and supposedly Romeo loved video games, which they like never showed in the show. And so he would imagine himself and his little friend as video game characters in a problem roughly analogous to what was really happening to him. And
Yes.
it was just like me and two assistant animators every week for the show. We would have to we would have like 1 week to do that week's
Mhm.
animation.
Wow.
And
A tight window.
but it was only like 30 seconds of animation, but they
Yeah.
wanted it to be real fast and they wanted a lot of stuff to happen in it. It was terrible. You couldn't tell what the hell was going on. It could have been great with a better concept, but they just wanted some fast, cheap animation, which is why they went to Nick.com for the animation and not Nickelodeon Animation in LA.
I
So
see. Oh,
yeah.
interesting.
It was a very good learning experience, but honestly, I knew it was going to be so because I had to do that on top of my actual job there.
Mhm.
So, and I knew it was going to be so awful that when they told me it was approved and that I was going to get it, besides being excited, I literally passed out. I like got the news like in a supermarket and I literally like passed out
Oh, wow.
because I knew it was going to be so hard.
Oh
But
God, Space
whatever,
Down in
it
the
was done.
Melons.
It's a
Uh,
it's a funny story now, but
oh, that's even Little Romeo. I haven't thought about that guy in a million years. So hey, that's a blast from the past.
yeah.
Well, Lisa, I was looking a bit through some of the your work that you've done, and I see you'd worked on writing plays. I do theater as well, and
You
like,
know.
what has that been like? Like going through the process of writing a play and then staging it yourself. Like that must be. Um, I haven't done that yet. I'd like to, but I've never got to it. But it's got to be such an interesting and insane experience because like theater work is a lot of work. People don't understand how much work it is. Well,
Well, I mean, when I was in high school, I also acted a little like
mhm,
just, acting lessons, but I pretty quickly realized that I didn't really want to be on stage.
mhm,
And I realized that I wanted to be the person making the words. But I also didn't really focus on writing plays until, and it's going to make me sound it fails the Bechdel test, but my first husband was a playwright.
mhm,
And so when I was with him, I started to get into a little bit of a New York downtown theater scene and,
mhm,
meet some people. And I worked on a play with a friend and about Dorothy Parker. We just did a stage reading of it. And then my ex-husband got into Yale School of Drama, so we went up to New Haven. And that was a great experience for him, but honestly, it was just like sort of living in the shadows of all of those people who were so like excited about their existence. And I was
mhm.
just like, it's ridiculous. So I was like, fuck that. I'm going to write a play.
Yeah.
And so I wrote a play. And then when we got back to New York, and I also directed a play while I was up there at the Yale Cabaret. It was the first production of Kate Walbert's Year of the Woman. And
Mm,
Kate Walbert she's actually a fairly well-known writer. That production actually did go on to do many other productions. But when we got back to New York, I we were kind of in a little bit of a world, and so we became friends with some people who were working at Soho Rep. We started to do some um I started to do some work with them. I directed a few plays at some of their 10-minute play festivals. I had a few of my plays produced, and I assistant directed for a few different people, Jim Simpson, Mac Wellman. These are like very downtown.
mhm.
Jim Simpson is Sigourney Weaver's husband, but he's a
Right.
he's a well-known playwright. But when you're an assistant director, you're like one of like seven.
Yeah.
Um, but I got some good experience. It was really fun. I really love the theater, and I love writing plays, and I just basically had kids. And my marriage imploded, and I had ended up with two babies, and I had to make some money, so I had to let something go.
Yeah.
And theater was what took, like you said, it takes so much time, and I love the collaborative process of it, and I love being out there in the world, and I love hearing your words said out loud, and I love, working with the director, and I love all those things. But it's if you have small children, it's just I don't know how people do it unless that's your only thing, but I had to make money.
Mm,
So I ended up getting a job in advertising, and I found that a lot of the and it was just on a whim. I was a very like snooty, like literary person. I didn't have a TV in college. I thought ads were like stupid, commercials were stupid. I thought, advertising was going to be dumb. But I had like children who needed to eat. And
mhm,
so I needed to get a job. So somehow or another, I wiggled my way in. I got this job, and I found that the people in the agency were like crazy smart and so creative. And it was a lot of that same sort of feel and vibe of putting on a play where, when you're kind of like in that moment and you're doing it, and doing it, and then you do whatever you have to do, and then you make it happen, and then you pass out. Like
mm,
that's what being in advertising is like. It was so much like being in theater. And there were a lot of skills that were translatable. They're just like being a creative director is not that different from being a theater director. I mean, obviously there's differences, but it's kind of it's the
mm.
same vibe.
Yeah,
So
corralling artistic people is
work.
tough. So doing it in movie
Yes,
form
yes,
is yeah
yes.
is like doing it in a marketing situation. Like I'm a graphic designer. That's my normal gig.
So you know what I'm talking
I'm
about.
familiar. Yes, I work for myself now, so that's lovely. But yes, I've been in worlds and working with people under me and stuff where it's been like, oh man, sometimes it can be really rewarding, but sometimes it could be a real slog too, depending on the people you're working with. So the team really helps.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
And getting them motivated and getting them excited and getting the right people in the right room and all that.
yeah.
So that was kind of like my origin story of how I got from there to here.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah.
I see, John, that you work with the Kubert School of Art. You teach there? Is that so accurate?
I taught there for almost 10 years. I don't teach there anymore.
Okay.
I'm talking to Pratt, my alma mater, about possibly teaching one or two Lisa classes this summer.
Uh,
Um, so we'll see
Yeah.
if one or both of those happen.
oh, cool.
But yeah, after I was left Nickelodeon,
Mhm.
um, and by left I mean laid off,
Oh my God.
which
I was gonna say the way you worded
hey,
that, I was like, did they throw you on the
You
street? Like they opened the
like
like
not
I'm sorry.
share
You know what?
anything.
I'm not sorry about saying it because it happens to everybody there
oh yeah,
It
eventually.
yeah.
happens to everybody.
Oh yeah.
It's
Everybody,
Every artistic person has been
everybody.
laid off from somewhere at some time.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. It's just part of
Well,
the gig.
I mean, it's part of the corporate, how they
Mm,
balance their books. It's honestly something I don't think people should hide because it's pretty
no.
messed up. I lasted there for 10 years, so,
Yeah.
I did well. But after that, well, actually, that's sort of part of both the origin story of like me getting into webcomics and teaching.
Mhm.
I had wanted to do a web comic at the time. I had never known what to do in comics. I had done like a little thing here or there, but I kind of like didn't quite know what I wanted to do with it and had been futzing around for many years.
Mhm.
And
And
also like just to give yourself credit, like he was doing a lot of art for other people's concepts. So
Mm,
a lot of other writers that he knew from, I guess, Nickelodeon would reach out to him and say, "Oh, I'm pitching this, I'm pitching that. Can you do the artwork?"
mm,
And so he'd always been doing these pitches for other people, but he hadn't really done something that was like his own story, which I
mm.
know he really wanted to do.
No.
oh, thank you, Lisa. And then I had been, the webcomics kind of like was becoming like, kind of like a big thing
Mhm.
around that time, like player versus player
Mhm.
and other ones. And I had been developing a webcomic about the Frankenstein monster and the Bride of Frankenstein. So it was like background noise. It was still like kind of roughly autobiographical. It's like that they live in modern day New York City and
That's fun. That's really
the,
fun.
yeah.
Like a
Uh,
domestic,
uh,
like just domestic situation between them just living in on the land.
well, I mean, the crazy things would happen, but at the
Yeah.
basis of it, it was
It's a
them as a
relationship
couple
story.
in New York
Yeah,
It
that's
City.
was
sweet.
kind of a
And
concept of Frankenstein was laid off and he needed to get a job.
well, that's what became the first story
Nice.
when I got laid off, and but I had been developing it and developing it. Whenever there'd be like a boring meeting at Nickelodeon, which in the corporate world means every day.
Hmm.
I'm sketching and resketching the character designs and everything, and finally, I'm out of Nickelodeon. I got like a good release package and Lisa's like, this is it. This is like, you've been like talking about doing this thing for 3 years.
Yeah.
Now is the time. You need to put this out there. And so I put it out there and it got really nice attention and it was really great. And that kind of helped lead me to working at the Kubert School. Um, uh, the Frankenstein comic, it kind of ended, it kind of petered out after a while because it like I started it like a web comic should be. If you're going to do regular updates, I started it as a comic strip,
Mhm.
but I really wanted to do full comic pages. And it just got started to take longer and longer to do. And the time between updates became longer and longer. And I was busy teaching and also doing freelance art. So it kind of fell by the wayside. And, you know, I kind of was then out of, you know, some other things, I had done some other things, but, you know, I couldn't get back into the webcomics until Background Noise came along and that clicked.
And I think
What?
that like he learned from doing Frankenstein Superstar was really helped us allow background noise comic to be successful and prolific because if John can send you some copies. It's super beautiful, it's super detailed, it took a lot of time to get that level of polish, and he knew when he started to do background noise comic, and honestly like he did the first comics on his own, and I kind of came in afterwards when it's sort of naturally evolved where you know he would draw a comic, and then he would ask me about the script, and suddenly I was rewriting the scripts, and then all of a sudden we were doing it together.
Mhm.
But he really wanted to keep a simple style. He wanted to start with a set that was easy to reproduce so that we could kind of change the words again and again. And so everything he learned at Frankenstein Superstar really helped us to make this be a much more successful project. And also, I mean, it goes back to like why we're doing a book. Those comics are beautiful, and they're sitting on a server somewhere. Nobody's really looking at them.
Mhm.
There's kind of an immediacy to anything online, but there's also like an immediate forgetfulness of
Mhm.
it. So if it's not like top of mind, it's no longer valid. Whereas when you have a book, it sort of exists, and there's obviously buzz when something comes out, but people are reading Maus and it didn't come out yesterday.
Yeah.
And I'm not to say that I'm not trying to,
Oh
say
yeah.
that
No,
art
I
is
get it.
like
Yeah.
Maus, but
Yeah.
there's something a little bit more timeless about books. And also, the way the world is, like you're putting your work out there and it's being controlled by, Mark Zuckerberg because he
Mhm.
owns Instagram. And like for all we know, like I don't know, I just feel like not to be like a whatever, but there's something about analog that's not bad.
Oh, I agree. I think, I don't know. I talked about this with someone recently, and it was on here. I think it was, I said that, like, I think as humans, there's something we need tactile stuff. It's like, being with someone and touching them, holding their hand, whatever. There's something with stuff too, like, because I collect records and Blu-rays and comics,
Yeah,
books. I mean, I read
yeah,
stuff online, but there's something that's like to sit in your chair with the book, the ritual of it. It's like the word you take the time out to do that. It's so easy to be distracted when you're living in the digital world because you get notifications, a Facebook update, whatever, and then you get drawn away from whatever it is you're focused on. At least when you have these things and you're just sitting there kind of going all into it, it sort of takes your attention the way a lot of this work in your guys's too demands. It should be poured over and appreciated for all the hard work that goes into it.
thank you.
uh
And I think that your brain also gets something out of
yeah, I agree.
something. There's psychology behind, it's not meditation, but it's in that kind of world of
Yeah,
like
just
brain
makes you feel
quiet.
grounded,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
like I'm taking up physical space, I'm touching a physical thing.
Right, right,
I
right.
guess it feels more important, I guess, than just something that's, online can be quite disposable. But I
Absolutely.
mean, some
Great
people have
word.
built huge careers just doing that. So, but did you guys have, like, when you decided to undergo this, or when John began and then you came on board with background noise, was there any trepidation about sort of putting your own life? I know it's kind of got a comedic spin to it, but
Yeah.
putting it out there, like, whatever. I'm sure there are things that went into the comic that were real life events, and
Oh, absolutely.
and giving that sort of access to people even through a comic can be a little,
It's
well,
it's all true.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a diary comic, so it's all true. Uh, but yeah, no, we very much had to. You always have to, like, kind of balance out what you're willing to show and
Mm,
what might not be a good thing to share. But ironically, the most personal things are also the most universal things.
mm,
Um, So, for example, when we have fights, those fights can be very personal and very raw and hard to
Yeah,
to.
for
It's
sure.
hard enough just dealing with it just between the two of us, but
Yeah,
then
yeah.
sharing with other people. But the thing is, when we start the fight comics are like some of the most popular ones.
Yeah, because they're relatable. Everybody in a relationship ever has, had a fight about something. So,
Both the relationship dynamics of it and a lot of the subject matter things
mhm.
that people fight about, like money and other things, respecting each other and
Yeah.
different things, and also mental health stuff.
Mhm.
Again, it's like you want to talk about it because it's something that shouldn't be stigmatized and people should be able to talk about it, but also you got to be careful about what you expose about yourself online.
Yeah.
So but again, it's like there's a lot of people who relate to this stuff.
Well, it's hard to be vulnerable in any sense, right? Like regardless of like if you're doing a stage show or you're doing something where you're like, or you're writing something or the part of like no matter what artistic thing you're doing, even if it's not a book about your life, um, you're still showing people a side of you, regardless of whether how deep it is. Like if the narrative is about you specifically, yes, that's the most macro version of it. But even just working on a Superman comic or something, and you have some part of his life or some story that he's dealing with that's close to you. I mean, that still comes out. So there's like a real
Yeah.
emotional part of that that's in a vulnerability that anybody that does, like stand-up comedians or people that do comics about their own lives or actors or, there's like a level of putting yourself out there that's hard to reckon with sometimes, especially because I guess it's like humans fear judgment, right? So just feeling that people are judging your life because of whatever's going out there, that's sometimes hard when you kind of shed that and realize that it's a common language we all kind of share, especially in relationships. It's very interesting.
But
Uh,
it's very liberating and it's very healing.
yeah.
Like what you do, it's
Yeah,
like,
cathartic. Yeah,
wow, I'm not alone. And
yeah.
it's very gratifying. Like a lot of the things that seem very personal, that seem very like we were like felt very a lot of shame about.
Mhm.
Um, sharing, people were just like, oh my God, I totally get this, very relatable. People were adding each other. And also there was a little period in, I don't know when it was, when before they changed the algorithm, when we reached people beyond our comic, or like something changed in Instagram so that the algorithm sort of shifted a little bit. But before that, we would get a lot of like DMs where people would say, they would just ask us for advice. We'd have to be careful about like how
Oh,
to say,
yeah.
you know
You're like
like
relationship counselors now.
relationship counselors,
Yeah,
like kid counselors, like parents would, like kids
right.
would DM us and say, you just did a comic about, your daughter who's out, and I just appreciate that so much, and I
Mhm.
wish I could talk to my parents about the
Oh,
fact that I'm out, and like, what should I do? And we were just like, oh my God, we're not shrinks, but
mm,
like, thank you for reaching out to us, and be affirmational without like trying to say anything that I don't know what to say.
mm.
you know
That's very sweet. That's lovely to hear.
Very sweet. It was very sweet. I love that.
I'm also a big cat person. I have four of them. I'm surprised you haven't seen one yet. So I love that your cat, of course, is a big part of the script as well.
Well,
We actually
Oh, you
don't
don't
have a
have a
cat.
cat? Oh no!
no, no,
Lies! No, I'm just
it's
joking.
no, it's a neighbor's cat.
Oh, really?
Yeah, our neighbor Karen, in the house behind our backyard, her cat Danny, would often visit us. Although, honestly, he stopped visiting us sometime during the pandemic.
Oh,
Um,
really?
yeah, he got too fat to fit over the fence,
She like
so he
built
does not
cool,
come over.
like she built this cool like kind of wall thing. I mean, it's not exactly a wall, but it's more like a trellis for her
Yeah.
vegetable, and it kind of blocked his ability to hop. Although the other cat, I was just looking over because pretty much every day at about this time, some other cat hops over the fence and jumps on the air conditioner outside the window and looks at going. It
He
happens
jumps
like
on the air conditioner and startles her every day.
Oh, that's
every
lovely. Yeah, they love
yeah,
doing that. We have like
It's
we
yeah.
I live out in
yeah.
the country. I mean, not really in the country. Like there's a town right close, like 5 minutes away. But it's a place called Old Barns. So it's like um it's farming area. So there's quite a few houses around. But the woods aren't very far. You know, I hear coyotes every night howling in the woods and stuff. But yeah, there's a neighbor's cat. Neighbor had a cat that would come, and it would just. We had a huge picture window on her deck, and we have a pillow in front of it when the cats. Some of them will sleep on it. And one of
Mm,
our old cats that had passed away, he'd be sleeping there almost every day, and the neighbor's cat would come and just stare at him through the glass, and he would
yeah,
be pawing at the glass and yelling, and like, no,
yeah.
the cat would just watch him because he knew he couldn't touch him, right? So
Yeah.
they love just
We
needling at each other like that.
When we
we
first
used to
moved
be. Go
Oh, you already
ahead.
tell the story. When we first moved into the house, like we live in Brooklyn. It's a row house. There's a postage size backyard and then another postage size backyard. And so like part of the reasons the cats wander around back there is that it's basically a big courtyard, it's all blocked off.
Mm.
So there's lots of freedom so they can hop over the fence and stuff. And so there's like a little like, I don't know, gang of neighborhood cats that they're just like friends. They're like, it's like, the little rascals of cats. They're just like hanging out there. And when we first moved in, the house had been empty for a year or two before we moved in. It was kind of like the windows were gone. It was kind of shitty. And we had to like have it, fixed so we could live in it. But when they put the windows in, and we moved in, the cats were freaked out and they would come and they would stand outside the window and they would just look and they'd be like, they would just kind of stare at us like in this creepy way, like, what are you doing in our house? Like we were in their play, their clubhouse or something. I mean, eventually they got the idea, but they were upset. And then, part of the reason Danny was in our comic was that if we opened the door, he would just come in. He
Mhm.
just thought this was his house. So, he would just come in and the kids would scratch his head and John would pick him up and I'd shout because I'm allergic to cats, get that cat out.
Oh,
And um but they were just like, this is our place. And that's kind of how they became part characters in our comic.
oh, that's lovely. No, it makes sense. I mean, hey, they're part of your life. You got to incorporate them into
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
I mean, as far as the style of the strip goes, John, I really dig obviously the throwback to like the old-timey comic strips. Like it reminds me a lot of the old Disney stuff. Which is really cool. I really like the style of it a lot. It's really neat.
No,
And
yeah.
how you incorporate it. It reminds me a lot of um not to equate your work with something that's like a more modern thing, but like the Netflix show Cuphead, like the
Mhm.
style of how the gangliness and all that stuff is really cool. But I did come across just looking at some of your guys' work. You're the one you've done about all the obviously book banning is becoming a very popular thing in your country.
Mm.
So that was a lovely. I hope that got a lot of attention because it's a great little strip to draw some attention to an important, very important subject. Do you guys feel like? I mean, your stuff probably doesn't fall into that realm, does it? Or is it just as far as like,
We the comic really is about us and things that we do and
mm,
things we're concerned about. And, naturally, Lisa being a writer
mm,
and us both being parents, we're very concerned about, book banning, about, people's rights, as,
yeah,
the father of, one of our kids is gay
mhm.
and I'm a mixed race person and, um, Lisa's Jewish and it's like, it's just like so many groups are, kind of being under threat now because of, like crazy rhetoric,
Oh, it's
groups
insane.
being um demonized or scapegoated or whatever.
Yeah,
And so, we try to not be preachy, but we're also like really concerned about this stuff. So yeah,
yeah.
it works its way into the comics. Uh,
Well,
like Lisa said, back before 2020, the algorithm was kind of seemed like I think what they did was I think they kind of funneled people into their own camps, uh, so that you have less of a reach and there's less fighting. But before we like reached a wider audience and we actually like reached a lot of people who didn't like things that we posted about and give us a lot of negative comments. And ironically, I missed that, not because I liked the negative comments, but just because we had a wider reach. And I think that's kind of more the way it should be,
yeah.
is you're not as filtered. I don't mind, people like being mad so long as more people are seeing the things that you're talking about and the points you're trying to make.
Yeah, well, like it's easy to like it's so easy to just build a little echo chamber around yourself and never have to see a differing opinion or a differing point or even a different culture or type of person if you live in a very, you're a white
Right.
person in a white area and you don't have to look at, minorities or think about them or whatever. Like it's and the more they build that up, the more it's easier to other them and then make them
Right.
scapegoats and the enemy.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, you can talk all day about the political side of things. It's unfortunate, but I really did like the Dr. Seuss method in which you did that. I thought that was very nice, and I'm sure
Thank
Seuss would have
you.
approved.
Yeah.
Wherever, but and it's funny because like I recently hosted a event. I guess it's not that recent, a few months ago, in in November. It was like a adult. Oh no, I have to word that right. It's a book fair for grown-ups. So it's like but if I say adult book fair, it sounds like something else.
Yeah.
But it was like at a local bar, and it was an idea. I always thought it'd be cool to do like when I was a kid, they had those Scholastic book fairs where they would get the little
Yeah.
sheet,
Yeah.
and
Mm.
so I did that for adults. So you get the sheet ahead of time, and you can go and one of the books that if you ever make it back to Nova Scotia and Halifax, my comic haunt is called Strange Adventures. It's a really really great place, and they'd come
Okay.
out and were selling books, and one of the books they had was Genderqueer, which is that you guys referenced in the
Yeah.
in the strip, which and they said this is like one of the most banned books in the States right now. And I so I picked it up. I'm like, if they don't want me to read it, of course I'm going to read this. So I went and I read it, and there is nothing in that book. Like I just like are people the people don't read the things that they're banning.
No.
And it's insane. There's one thing that someone mentioned, and I can understand, I suppose, why. But if someone glanced at that page and actually read the context of it, then they would never know. But like it actually, as someone who's just a normal, I mean, normal is not the right word. I have to rephrase that. An average person, I guess. Um, that to read that book, it actually gave me a little more understanding. I've always been very accepting and whatever of people of all types, but that one actually gave me more insight into the actual physical and physiological reasons why people feel this way and how like when you're born and all the things it does with you develop with your brain. And it was very eye-opening. And I'm like, this is like very important stuff that people should be reading. It just like makes it
Yes.
more understandable and like it's
But they don't want it to be understandable. They want
no,
what you said
yes.
earlier. They want us to be siloed. They want us to be angry. They want us to be scared.
Yeah.
And that's how they could control people and do whatever the hell they want to do.
Yeah, the
So
thing I think I was watching the Daily Show. That's like the only way I really consume news now because it makes it funny and that way I can sort of uh
tolerate
take it
it.
take it in without getting too upset.
Yeah.
Is when they're like I don't know Trump blaming all the DIY hires and all this or the DI whatever
DEI. Yeah.
DEI hires um for that, and he was saying how like it's just basically propagating back the stereotype that the white male standard is the gold standard, like that's what the right person is. And it makes me so angry. So it's like, but there's a part of me that has to be like, it's not my country, I can't do anything about it, I just have to live in my own country, we have our own problems here.
You have
um
your own problems too. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
so it's like
it's a global, it's a global, it's a global movement.
mm,
And I don't think, I mean, it's unfortunate. It's not, I mean, the United States is loud and big,
mm,
and therefore it's getting a lot of attention. And it is very scary because, you know, for in other times when not to be like all Star Wars, but when the
Mm.
dark force rose, this was a place of light. And it's if this is not a place of light, where is that place of light? Canada has always been the place that Americans go when the shit hits the fan
Mhm.
from the Vietnam War on. But if I don't know if you saw the television version of Handmaid's Tale.
My wife's watching it right now, and
Well,
I haven't
when
had
you
a chance
get
to watch it
to
yet. But it's
when you
written
get
by
to
it's written by Margaret Atwood, who's a very
by
famous
Margaret
Canadian writer.
Atwood.
Yeah.
Yes, the great Margaret Atwood.
Yes,
Um,
one of our best, I'd say, of the
yes, I
Canadian
would
artistic
say
outputs.
yes, yes. Um, but there's a lot of amazing Canadian writers.
Mm.
It's amazing. But that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, there's a point where, and I don't want to be a spoiler, but at some point when they make it to Canada, you start to see how some of the reactionary rhetoric is, kind of rings true because,
Mm.
there's, I mean, Canada is filled with people like Americans. I
Oh yeah.
mean,
We
that
have our
different.
own demagoguery. There's the guy that's running
Yeah,
for the PC party now is almost like a mini Trump. Not quite as bad, but he definitely echoes a lot of his rhetoric
yeah,
and his style of getting people riled up over and cutting public funding on important things and
right.
all these ridiculous stuff. So, he's probably going to be the next prime minister, so that's obviously our own issue, but we'll see what happens when that happens. Um, Trying to get too upset about it, working gotta take the day to day as it comes.
Right.
Uh,
Out of the office. That's my word of advice from here are
mhm,
your neighbors in the South. Like, I feel like people just didn't understand how big of a deal it was to
mm,
not to like keep him out.
mhm.
And I mean, now we're seeing it's just there's irrefutable damage that's happening.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
national parks are closing, schools are closing. It's
Medical
the
research getting shut
medical
down,
research
yeah,
is getting
cancer
shut down.
things.
It's just like crazy things that, are kind of benchmarks of modern society and
yeah,
civilization are really it's only been a month,
yeah.
you
It's
One of
know,
our
very
one of our
short-sighted,
insane.
and
recent yeah, one of our recent comics was about living in a post-apocalyptic world and going out to try to find eggs.
yeah.
And
Did the price go down at least? Is it the eggs cheaper now in the
they're not
post-apocalyptic
cheaper yet, no.
world?
And
Bird flu.
they fired the people who were like supposed to be guarding us against bird flu right when the
Yeah.
bird flu is spreading. So it's a crazy
Yeah,
time.
it's yeah. There's a very fuck you attitude I had the second time around when I was like, well, you know, they voted, that's what they got, so they're gonna have to deal with it. But then you talk to folks like yourself where you're like, really good, normal people that are stuck in it as well, and you have a lot more compassion when it comes
I
to that.
mean,
So
the thing to remember is that he didn't get any more votes this time, just less people voted.
yeah.
And that was, not to go crazy political, but that was very calculated.
Oh yeah.
And they did a lot of stuff before the election to create division so that people who might have voted for Kamala didn't vote at all.
Yeah.
And they didn't need people to vote for him. They just needed them to not show up. And they
Yeah.
didn't show up. And my older son keeps saying, "Don't blame the people who didn't show up. They're exercising their democratic right." And I'm not blaming them, but I am pointing a finger at the rhetoric that pushed them to make a decision that made it seem like it was better for them to not vote, that somehow they were being heard
Mm.
by not voting rather than voting for somebody who maybe not have been perfect for them, but wouldn't have decimated the world in the way that or basically they're stealing our money.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
every day something new comes out in the news about how, Elon Musk is, tapping into Social Security. That New York State you know, is suing them because they're stealing from our public's funds. And meanwhile, you know, Trump is charging his golf tee fees to the country.
Mhm.
It's just an insane thing.
Yeah, well,
That's,
it's almost so transparently dumb that it's hard to even like, like when someone's trying to do something secretly hidden, some evil hidden thing. It's like you get the clandestine nature of it, but it's all just so out in the open and so blatantly
so out in the
apparent,
open.
like the fact that like I don't know, Musk just got a contract to make like 400 armored cyber trucks that are going to the military. Like you're like it's like it's so like that they just cut all this funding for like these public programs that help people to go do that. That's where the money went. Like it's
The,
just so
the dumbness just helps them. The
yeah,
outrageousness
it does.
just
Yeah,
helps them.
it
It,
just
it makes us
bombards you and you can't
crazy.
focus.
Yeah,
It's
it
yeah,
makes us crazy, which they love,
mhm,
that it's driving us crazy.
yeah.
And, and you can't do it because your like mind is blown. You're like, oh my God, which one of these fires am I going to put out? They're
Yeah,
all ridiculous.
Everybody loves
Me,
America.
I'm mad at everybody. I blame
yeah,
everybody. So
yeah,
I've never been as cynical about
yeah.
everything as I am now.
Yeah.
And honestly, you mentioned like kind of changing the way you absorb news.
Mm,
At first, I was no news.
yeah,
I like because I used to listen to hours every day,
yeah,
and then after the election, I was like, no, none, zero.
mm,
And I'm slowly like picking and choosing, how I get it, and both balancing out because I actually I'm older than Lisa. And my kids from a previous marriage. I have three grandkids now.
mm. Oh wow.
They just had twins
Oh,
recently.
congratulations.
1 to 3 grandkids.
Nice.
Um, and I kind of like, two granddaughters. I'd like them to not be secondhand citizens, and
Mm.
so I'm like, oh, I guess I can't just say "F you, America."
Yeah.
You're racist
Well,
and you voted for a racist. I hope you burn. I kind of can't say that because
yeah.
my kids still have to, and now grandkids have to grow up in
The first
this.
time around, I used to often say, like, I don't know if Trump himself is actually racist or he just panders to racists, and I'm not sure what's more evil. I said, like, if you know better and you still choose to do it, what's worse? Like, I don't know. But
As a mixed race person, I have very strong opinions
oh no,
about
no,
it.
I
It
don't
doesn't make any difference. It's
no, no.
all,
Yeah, no, my opinion of that is I like learning more as time goes on, and like I watched that movie that Sebastian Stan did where he played him, The Apprentice, which
I haven't
actually it's a really good movie.
watched.
But all the stuff with his dad and how they're trying to like, make it so that they could kick certain minorities out of the buildings that they funded and all this sort of stuff. It's very apparent early on that it was, yeah, his opinion
Yeah,
definitely follows a certain way.
yeah.
But I guess we should shift to something slightly nicer and tell me about the new book. I mean, tell me about this lovely new book you guys
Yeah,
have
for
coming out.
God's sakes, let's talk about the book.
Yeah, let's talk about that. So this is
Lisa?
oh, you go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, no, you go
No,
ahead.
I was just gonna say, I mean, it's sort of been in a way, we had this goal to launch this book on
Mhm.
Valentine's Day, and it's been a goal for a while. And you know, when we thought about it, it was my marketing mind that did it, love letters every day, launch it on Valentine's Day, but I hadn't been really thinking about, what the climate was going to be that we were launching it with
Right.
into. In some ways, it's kind of like, who gives a shit about a book of comics when the world is burning?
I don't know. That's when you have to love art, though. I think,
Well,
yeah.
I
Read.
I
Sorry,
think
continue. Yeah.
that is the point, is that, it is a it is a terrible time, but if you're not kind of laughing, you're not going to survive it. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It reminds me, there's this movie I've talked about a few times called Sullivan's Travels. It's like an old black and white movie. It's about this guy that's like a Preston Sturges. It's like his first movie. It was on the Criterion. I have the Criterion Blu-ray of it, and I want to watch it forever. But it's just sort of this guy that's like a writer that writes a lot of goofy comedies. He's very popular in Hollywood, and they all just want him to keep making those. But then he wants to make the big tragedy, deep, artistic thing that explores poverty and pain in the country, and he doesn't have that frame of reference, so he like makes a situation where he goes and lives among the poor and tries to like live amongst that. And there's a whole bunch of situations that end up putting him in jail, in a situation where he can't go back to his old life. And while in jail, he's like, they do a movie night and they show everybody like a goofy cartoon. And there's all these people that are living in like the worst lives they could be living right now that are miserable every day that are laughing. And he has this realization that like joy and laughter that comes from art isn't a lesser form of art. Like just because it's about writing about pain doesn't make your art more important than writing about things that make people happy. Because for some people, laughter and enjoying funny stuff is all they have. And it was an important lesson for me to not try to stay out of being too jaded about stuff like that. So yeah, no, I think it's very important. I think you got to laugh, and especially at everything. That nothing should be taken seriously, in my opinion.
That's true. That's a great point.
Yeah.
That movie looks cool. We're gonna have to
Oh,
look
check
at
it out. Yeah, it's a good movie. It's like it's a product of its time. It's a big studio movie from the 50s, black and white. But it's a great movie. It's very touching.
Oh, there's the cat.
Oh yes, this is Lebowski.
So the book, just to give you a little bit more context,
Sure.
it's a collection of the best comics from the first year that we created comics for Background Noise Comic. Like we said earlier, we literally made a comic every day, and many of them really stand the test of time. It's not every single one of them. Some of them were very timely and about like a TV show that nobody cares about anymore. Because
Orange is the New Black.
yeah,
It's a
Orange
good
is
show.
the New Black, yeah. But many of them still stand the test of time. So, we picked the best of them, and then we also learned so much during that experience. And like we said earlier, we related to so many people and saw how they were really getting so much out of our vulnerability. So we wrote a series of essays, not a lot of them. There were more that some got cut down because, we wanted to just keep it sort of short and sweet, but they sort of punctuate the romantic and artistic journey. So everybody always asks why the characters don't have mouths. We have an essay about that. Many people ask about the cats. We have an essay about that.
Oh, that's cool.
Many people ask about, the vulnerability, the mental health issues. We have an essay about that. So we wanted to be able to give a little bit further peek behind the scenes so that people could understand how we did it and why it worked.
That's lovely. No, it's great. And it's very tender, it's very sweet. It's a book that I think it's important, especially people in relationships, to kind of not take yourself too seriously, which I think is important as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which is something we all need to remember.
We-
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So it's out on Kickstarter now. I believe when this airs, it'll still be on Kickstarter. So that'll be excellent. Do you have any other projects coming down the pipeline or appearances you guys want to get out there?
We are going to be at Fanfare in New York City on April 4th and 5th. It's a small New York City con that's based out of a high school. It sounds small, but it's actually a very cool event. So we'll be there. I think we're going to be speaking and maybe doing be on a panel. I'm not sure, John. I know we're definitely going to do a presentation. And then, like John said, he's teaching at Pratt over the summer. It's through the School of Continuing Ed, so actually anybody can sign up for the class. We're probably going to be teaching a comic creation class in the fall. I think
Awesome.
over the summer, I think he's teaching editorial cartoon, right, John?
Yeah. Yes, but
That's awesome.
maybe also the comic class.
Oh, maybe we're teaching a comic class too.
Oh, right on. That's awesome. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
very cool.
please check out the book. Please support us on Kickstarter. We're halfway funded. We just got nominated. They just
We
called
got
us
the projects we love.
projects we
Oh,
love.
awesome.
About. Yep. So
That's beautiful. Well, I will be a new pledge, so I'll be in that
thank you so
before.
much.
Yeah, I'm excited. I see there's a Canon and EU version, so I can go. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, guys, for being the show. This is a blast. Really
Thank
fun,
you. And
really fun chatting with
I'll
you.
send you that link to that artist residency. See what
Oh
you-
yeah, that'd be great. Maybe I'll meet you guys up there sometime.
That'd be cool. I hope we
Yeah.
get it. Fingers crossed.
Oh, I'm pulling for you.
Thank you.
All right.
All
Have a great day.
Take care. Nice to
Bye-bye.
meet you.
You too. Bye bye. And there you have it, my conversation with Lisa and John, the creators of Background Noise. Great conversation, great insight into a very cool slice of life creation that they've put out into the world, and be sure to check that out on Kickstarter. Be sure to follow them on the socials to see updated comic strips as they come out, and feel warm your heart with lovely human tales. It's the thing that keeps us connected, is our shared experience as humans. And I feel as though we lose that empathy, we other people that we don't agree with, then all of a sudden the world gets to be a very small place, and we don't need that. We need a much larger, more encompassing space, as a people, to get along. So let's work towards that. Be sure to tune in next week for another episode. This time I'm talking with Helen Mullane, very cool comic creator, writer, putting out some interesting work. If you enjoyed my conversation with Dan McDade, we do talk a lot about folk horror in this one as well. It's a theme I tend to be circling back to lately. So great conversation. Go check out some folk horror stuff in the meantime. But come back next week to check out that conversation. Helen is really cool, and we have a really, really nice talk, and I really, really enjoyed that as well. So I think I have a new person to find obscure horror movies from, which is always a plus in my world. So I'll look forward to talking to you then, but in the meantime, stay safe, have fun, read some comics, and hey, go watch some folk horror. It's a really fun genre.
The Graphic Histories Podcast is a proud partner of the United Federation of Podcasts.